Jennifer Gledhill, a respected nurse, Ryan, the loyal boyfriend, David, the secret lover, and Mark, the friend lurking in the shadows. Their lives collided in a web of betrayal, obsession, and violence, sending in a murder no one saw coming. Jennifer Gledhill was the kind of person people described as dependable. She had worked at the hospital for several years and had earned a reputation for her calm presence during emergencies. To her neighbors, she was polite but private, the type who waved in passing but never lingered to gossip. To Ryan, her long-term partner, she was steady and supportive. They had built a quiet life together, one that seemed stable from the outside, but what no one knew was that Jennifer was carefully balancing two very different lives, and the cracks in her facade were beginning to show. It began innocently enough: a late shift at the hospital, a coworker who made her laugh during stressful nights, and the kind of attention that felt intoxicating after years of routine. David was everything Ryan wasn't: spontaneous, risk-taking, and bold. He didn't ask about bills or dinner plans. He offered Jennifer escape. What started as long conversations in the staff lounge slowly turned into text messages, and those messages quickly became meetings outside of work. Jennifer convinced herself that it wasn't serious, that it was just a distraction from the monotony of her daily life. But with each secret rendezvous, she was tying herself tighter to a man she barely understood. Her friends began noticing small changes. She looked distracted during group outings, checking her phone constantly. She came up with excuses for why she couldn't attend family dinners or weekend trips. Ryan noticed too, though he brushed it off at first. He trusted Jennifer. They had been together for years, and he couldn't imagine her hiding something from him. Still, the unease lingered. He would ask why she was late, or why she seemed distant, and she would smile, kiss him on the cheek, and offer a vague answer. For a time, that was enough to quiet his doubts. For Jennifer, the thrill of the affair was undeniable. Every secret meeting with David felt like stepping into another world. He was reckless in ways that both excited and unsettled her. He drank too much, he drove too fast, and he had a temper that flared at the smallest frustrations. Yet she kept going back, convinced that she could manage the chaos. Deep down, she knew she was playing with fire, but part of her couldn't let it go. And here's where I want to ask you something. Do you think Jennifer's choices were driven by love, or was it simply the addiction to danger? Tell me what you think in the comments below, because this is where her story takes a turn that few could have predicted. The secrecy began to take a toll on her. Sleepless nights left her exhausted at work, and she started making mistakes that colleagues noticed. At home, Ryan was becoming increasingly suspicious. He couldn't pinpoint what had changed, but he knew something was wrong. Jennifer began to feel trapped, caught between two men and two identities. To Ryan, she was the devoted partner. To David, she was the passionate accomplice in a forbidden romance. And to herself, she was starting to feel like neither. One night, after an argument with David, she returned home, shaken. He had grown angry when she suggested they should take a break. His words echoed in her mind. If she left him, he wouldn't let her walk away easily. Jennifer brushed it off as jealousy, but the intensity in his eyes unsettled her. She thought about telling Ryan the truth, confessing everything, but fear held her back. She was terrified of losing the life she had built, the trust she had once valued so deeply. And here's the question for you. If you were in Jennifer's position, would you risk confessing the truth to your partner, or would you keep the secret buried? Let me know what you would do, because this decision would prove critical in the days ahead. Despite the fear, she continued seeing David. The cycle of passion, guilt, and arguments only deepened. She tried to convince herself she had control, that she could decide when it ended. But in reality, she was losing control more with every passing week. Her best friend later told police that Jennifer often appeared anxious, glancing over her shoulder as though expecting someone to be following her. She laughed it off when asked, but her eyes told a different story. Jennifer's life had become a performance. At work, she smiled and acted composed. At home, she pretended to be content with Ryan. In secret, she lived for the adrenaline that came with David. But a performance can't last forever, and Jennifer was beginning to feel the weight of her choices pressing down. Each day that passed made her wonder how long she could keep the two worlds apart before they collided. For Jennifer, the turning point was not a dramatic confession or a sudden moment of clarity. It was a quiet evening when she looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The lies, the stress, the constant fear of being caught, it had all hollowed her out. She told herself she would end it soon, that she would make a choice and stick with it. What she didn't realize was that the choice was already being made for her, and the consequences would be far more devastating than she ever imagined. The story of Jennifer Gledhill doesn't begin with violence. It begins with a secret, a temptation, and a decision to chase something that seemed harmless at first. But as you'll see, the smallest decisions can spiral into tragedies no one can undo. Jennifer thought she could end the affair quietly. One message to David, one difficult conversation, and she could slip back into the life she had with Ryan. She convinced herself it would be that simple. But David wasn't the type of man to let go without a fight. What she expected to be an ending turned into the beginning of something darker. At first it was little things. She would notice his car parked near the hospital after her shift, even though he didn't have a reason to be there. He began sending her long text messages late at night, some filled with apologies and pleas for another chance, others laced with anger and accusations. Jennifer ignored them, thinking he would tire of it, but instead, the messages grew more intense. He hinted that he knew where she was going, who she was with, and even when Ryan's car wasn't in the driveway, Jennifer started feeling a constant unease. Walking to her car after work, she caught herself scanning the lot for familiar headlights. At night, she thought she heard footsteps outside her apartment. Once, she discovered a note tucked beneath her windshield wiper. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was David's. It read simply, "You can't walk away." Imagine being in her position. Would you confront David Hednan, or would you keep quiet, hoping it would fade on its own? Comment below with what you would have done, because Jennifer chose silence, and that silence gave David more power. Her friends began to notice the changes in her behavior. She seemed restless during conversations. Her phone always turned face down on the table. One friend later recalled how Jennifer admitted she thought someone was following her home but quickly laughed it off, as if embarrassed to even say it aloud. The truth was, Jennifer was frightened. She wanted to go to the police, but hesitated. How could she explain that the man harassing her was someone she had chosen to be with? Revealing the affair would mean destroying Ryan's trust, and the shame of that weighed heavily on her. Ryan himself saw the stress. He asked if something was wrong, if work was overwhelming her, but she brushed him off. Just tired, she would say, or long shifts. In reality, she was living in constant dread of David's next move. She had tried to disentangle herself from him, but instead, it seemed she had only provoked something dangerous. Weeks passed, and the threats escalated. One night she came home to find her back door unlocked. Nothing was missing, but items on her kitchen counter had been moved. She told herself she might have forgotten to lock it, that maybe she was imagining the rest, but deep down she knew. Someone had been inside. Another time, she received an envelope at work containing nothing but a single photograph of her car parked outside her apartment. No note, no explanation. Just a silent reminder that she was being watched. And here's a thought for you. At what point does fear outweigh the risk of telling the truth? Jennifer never answered that question for herself. And the longer she stayed quiet, the more dangerous the situation became. Despite the mounting pressure, she tried to maintain her routine. She kept working at the hospital, kept spending evenings with Ryan, and kept trying to appear normal. But the strain was visible. Coworkers said she looked pale and distracted. Patients noticed she was no longer the warm, attentive nurse they remembered. She was slipping, and it was only a matter of time before something gave way. Jennifer began making plans to cut David off completely. She changed her phone number, stopped responding to his messages, and avoided the places where she thought he might show up. For a few days, it seemed to work. The silence was almost comforting. But then the phone calls started and known numbers that rang late at night. Sometimes no one spoke on the other end. Other times, she could hear breathing. She stopped answering, but the calls kept coming. Her anxiety grew unbearable. She confided to one friend that she felt like she was being cornered, but when asked if she had told Ryan, she shook her head. She couldn't bear to. The fear of losing Ryan, of exposing the betrayal, outweighed the danger she felt creeping closer. One evening, Ryan suggested they take a trip together to clear their heads. He thought a weekend away might help restore the closeness they once had. Jennifer agreed, but inside, she wondered if they had any closeness left to restore. Her mind was consumed with thoughts of David, and the possibility that he might be following them even then. The truth was inescapable. Jennifer's attempt to reclaim her life had only made her a target. The secrecy that once felt thrilling now felt suffocating. Every decision she had made in the shadows seemed to echo back at her, louder and more menacing. She didn't know it yet, but the threats she tried to ignore were leading her down a path she wouldn't return from. Her story was no longer about an affair, it was about survival. And in the days ahead, that survival would be violently ripped away. On the evening of November 14th, Jennifer left the hospital after another long shift. Security cameras showed her walking across the dimly lit parking lot, bundled in her coat, clutching her bag. She looked tired, moving quickly, as if she wanted to be anywhere but there. That image would be the last time most people ever saw her alive. By morning, her car was discovered abandoned on a quiet street near the edge of town. Inside were her purse, her wallet, and even her keys. It was as if she had simply vanished in the middle of her routine. When police were called, they treated it as a missing person case. At first, there was hope. Maybe she had gone to a friend's house. Maybe she had needed time alone. But that hope disappeared quickly when neighbors living near the river reported hearing a woman's scream late that night. Several said it was sharp and brief, followed by silence. No one had seen anything, but the timing was chilling. Investigators began to suspect that Jennifer had been attacked. Within 48 hours, a grim discovery confirmed their fears. Search teams combing the riverbank found a shallow grave hidden under loose soil and fallen leaves. Inside was Jennifer's body. She had been strangled. The community, once quiet and trusting, was shaken to its core. People struggled to understand how a young woman admired, for her kindness could end up buried in the dirt only a mile from her home. The violence of the crime suggested it wasn't random. It was personal. Detectives immediately focused on Ryan. In cases like this, the partner is almost always the first suspect. He had been with Jennifer for years, and if he had discovered the affair, he would have had motive to kill her. When questioned, Ryan appeared devastated, but cooperative. He swore he knew nothing about an affair, and insisted he had been away on business during the night of the murder. Investigators checked his story carefully. Flight records, hotel receipts, and co-workers all confirmed it. Ryan had not been in town when Jennifer died. For police, that meant turning their attention elsewhere. The next name on their list was David. He was the man Jennifer had been secretly seeing, the one she had tried to break free from, and the one who had been stalking and threatening her. Detectives questioned him quickly. David admitted to the affair, saying he and Jennifer had been romantically involved for months, but he claimed they hadn't spoken in weeks. He said she had ended things and he had moved on. His calm demeanor during questioning unsettled some of the officers. How could someone so recently rejected speak so casually about a woman now found murdered? But David's history didn't work in his favor. Witnesses recalled him loitering near Jennifer's workplace. Others described heated arguments between them. Several threatening notes linked back to his handwriting. To police, it seemed obvious. David had lost control, confronted Jennifer that night, and killed her when she tried to leave him for good. Still, there were gaps in the case. Surveillance footage placed David near his apartment around the time Jennifer disappeared, though it didn't completely rule him out. His phone records showed strange activity, calls made, but not answered, and periods of time where his phone was switched off. Detectives pressed him harder, but David stuck to his story. He claimed he hadn't seen Jennifer in days and insisted he had no idea what had happened to her. The evidence, though troubling, was circumstantial. Without direct proof, police couldn't be sure. Forensic teams scoured Jennifer's car, her apartment, and the riverbank. They found no fingerprints tying David to the crime scene. They found no DNA, no physical trace to pin him to the murder. It was frustrating, like chasing a shadow that refused to take shape. Meanwhile, Jennifer's friends were devastated. Many felt guilty for not pushing her harder to go to the police when she first confided her fears. Others were angry, convinced David was responsible and demanding he be arrested. Rumors swirled throughout town, painting him as a violent man who had finally snapped. Yet the investigation seemed to stall, unable to cross the line from suspicion to certainty. For the public, David became the villain. For the detectives, he was still just a suspect, but behind the scenes, tension grew. If David wasn't the killer, then who was? Could someone else have been watching Jennifer? Was her life more complicated than even her closest friends realized? In cases like these, the simplest explanation often feels like the truth. An affair gone wrong, a jealous lover, a violent end. And that's where police were leaning. But the case of Jennifer Gledhill was about to take a turn that no one expected. A turn that would reveal just how many secrets had been hiding in the shadows all along. As investigators prepared to close in on David, believing they finally had their man, a surprising lead emerged. While combing through hours of surveillance footage from the night Jennifer vanished, detectives noticed something odd. Just past midnight, a camera at a gas station 2 miles from the river showed Jennifer's car pulling into the lot. She wasn't alone. She stepped out and walked toward another vehicle, where a man was waiting. The face was blurry, but the license plate was clear. The car was registered to Mark, David's closest friend. At first, this detail seemed strange, but insignificant. Why would Jennifer be meeting David's friend in the middle of the night? When detectives brought Mark in for questioning, he claimed the meeting was innocent. He said Jennifer had reached out to him because she was scared of David and wanted advice on how to protect herself. Mark painted himself as the helpful friend, someone who was caught in the middle of a toxic situation. But investigators weren't satisfied. If Jennifer had trusted Mark enough to meet him privately, what else was happening between them? Digging deeper, police uncovered a disturbing pattern. Jennifer and Mark had been exchanging messages for weeks. They weren't romantic, but they carried a strange undertone. Mark frequently told Jennifer that she needed to cut David out of her life completely. He warned her that David was unstable, dangerous, and would never stop pursuing her. At first glance, it looked like concern, but the wording in some of those messages revealed something more unsettling. Mark often wrote as if he were the only one who truly understood her, the only one who could keep her safe. He told her she was special, that she deserved someone who would do anything for her. That phrase, "do anything," stood out to investigators. It didn't sound like simple concern. It sounded like obsession. When detectives confronted Mark with this evidence, his calm front began to crack. He admitted he had grown close to Jennifer, but denied harming her. He claimed he had dropped her off near her apartment the night she was last seen. But his story fell apart when cell phone records showed his device pinging near the riverbank, exactly where Jennifer's body had been found. Pressed harder, Mark shifted from denial to justification. He admitted to luring Jennifer out that night, under the guise of helping her escape David's threats. He told her he knew a safe place, a way to protect her from being followed. She trusted him enough to go, but when they reached the riverbank, Mark confessed his feelings. He told her he believed they were meant to be together, that she had been looking for someone like him all along. Jennifer rejected him. She told him she didn't feel the same way. That rejection, after weeks of building obsession, snapped something inside him. In his confession, Mark described the moment vividly. He said he panicked, terrified she would expose him to David or to Ryan. He grabbed her in a rage, hands tightening round her neck until she stopped struggling. Only then did he realize what he had done. Alone in the darkness, he dug into the soft soil by the riverbank and buried her body, hoping no one would ever connect him to the crime. The revelation stunned investigators. All along, the focus had been on David, the angry lover who had threatened Jennifer repeatedly. Yet it wasn't David who killed her. It was the friend in the background, the one no one had suspected, the one who pretended to be her protector while quietly nurturing his own dangerous obsession. When news of Mark's arrest broke, the community was once again shaken. David, though cleared of the murder, remained stained by his actions. His harassment had pushed Jennifer into fear that drove her to trust the wrong person. Ryan was left broken, forced to grapple with both the betrayal of the affair and the devastating loss of the woman he loved. Mark, once seen as a loyal friend, was sentenced to life in prison for Jennifer's murder. Jennifer's story became a tragic reminder of how secrets can spiral out of control. What began as a hidden romance led to threats, obsession, and finally, violence. She never could have known that the man she turned to for safety would be the one who ended her life. For those who knew her, the case was more than just headlines and court proceedings. It was the loss of a woman who had dedicated her life to helping others, stolen in an act of selfishness and obsession. For investigators, it was proof that the truth is rarely as simple as it seems. And for the audience watching now, it's a chilling warning about how quickly hidden choices and hidden people can destroy even the most carefully constructed lives. The case of Jennifer Gledhill closed with a conviction, but the scars it left on her family, her friends, and her community will never truly heal. It is a story of betrayal, obsession, and a tragedy that could not be undone.